He danced past defenders like he was skating across glass. And for a moment, just a moment, the world stood still. Before Raheem Sterling, before Ian Wright, before John Barnes ever pulled on an England shirt, there was Laurie Cunningham. He wasn't just quick, he wasn't just gifted, he was something football had never seen before, a black footballer who played with freedom and made millions believe. And yet, no statue, no stand in his name, no grand tribute on national TV, only silence. Laurie Cunningham was the first black player to represent England in a competitive match, and the first Englishman to sign for Real Madrid. He electrified West Bromwich Albion, shocked Europe in a white Real Madrid shirt, and made defenders dizzy across England, Spain, France, and beyond. But he didn't just break records, he broke barriers. He faced abuse, isolation, and racism, not just from the stands, but from within the game itself. And still, he played with elegance, with class, with something they couldn't teach in academies or explain in stats: grace under fire. But just as quickly as he rose, the spotlight faded. Injuries hit. Clubs forgot. The press moved on. And in 1989, at just 33 years old, Laurie Cunningham died in a car crash in Madrid. Gone. Before the world even had the chance to catch up to what he truly was. But not here. Not on this channel. Because Laurie didn't just play football. He rewrote its rules. He redefined its soul. If you believe in remembering the legends who opened doors and paid the price for others to walk through, subscribe. Because this is the story of the quiet genius who made a beautiful game braver and never got the standing ovation he deserved. Laurie Cunningham was born on March 8, 1956, in Archway, North London, to Jamaican immigrants, just a few years after the Empire Windrush brought waves of Caribbean families to post-war Britain. His father, Cuthbert Cunningham, had worked on the London railways. His mother, Mavis, raised Laurie and his siblings in a world where opportunity was scarce and discrimination was everywhere. Laurie didn't just grow up with a ball at his feet, he grew up with prejudice in his path, the kind that followed you into classrooms, job interviews, and football trials. He was different, not just because of his skin color in a white-dominated system, but because of how he moved. By the time he was a teenager, he had already rejected the idea that football had to be mechanical. While others were drilled into systems, Laurie brought rhythm, grace, elegance, imagination, like something you'd expect to see on a dance floor, not a pitch. And ironically, Laurie loved to dance. He studied ballet and contemporary dance in his teens, not to show off, but because it gave him balance, poise, creativity. And that artistry bled into his game. He was also an outsider in the football establishment. In 1974, after a brief stint as an apprentice at Arsenal, the club released him, citing that he didn't have the right attitude. What they really meant was, he wouldn't conform. But Laurie didn't fold. He went to Leyton Orient, a second division club in East London, and made 75 appearances, scoring 15 goals between 1974 and 1977. He was just 18 when he debuted, and already his dribbling, speed, and unpredictability had fans rising from their seats. He wasn't polished, he wasn't protected, but he was pure, and football had no idea what was coming. In 1977, Laurie Cunningham signed for West Bromwich Albion. The fee? £110,000. Modest by today's standards, but back then it meant belief. West Brom weren't just buying a player, they were changing their identity. Because alongside Cunningham, two more black players would soon arrive: Cyrille Regis and Brendan Batson. Together, the three formed what fans and media later called the 3 Degrees, a nickname drawn from the popular American soul trio, but one that came to mean far more than music. In an era when racial abuse was routine, monkey chants, bananas thrown from the stands, slurs from fans and sometimes even teammates, Laurie, Cyrille, and Brendan dared to be brilliant. Cunningham brought the flair. He would glide past defenders like they were statues, dance along the wing, and strike from impossible angles. He wasn't just a threat, he was theatre, and West Brom played into that rhythm. Under manager Ron Atkinson, they became one of the most exciting teams in England, bold, expressive, fearless. In 1978-79, West Brom finished third in the First Division, their highest position in over 2 decades. But what really turned heads? That night at Old Trafford, in December 1978. West Brom faced Manchester United in their own backyard and won 5-3 in what many still call the greatest away performance in First Division history. Cunningham was electric. Every touch, every run, every dribble seemed to hum with purpose. He wasn't just a footballer, he was a vision. That match wasn't just a win, it was a statement that black players didn't just belong in English football, they could define it. Behind closed doors, Laurie endured cruelty from opponents, from fans, from the media. But on the pitch, he answered with beauty. For many black British kids watching from the terraces or TV, Laurie wasn't just a player. He was proof. Proof that you could be black, proud, stylish, and unstoppable. By 1979, Europe had taken notice. And when Real Madrid, the giants of European football, came calling, it was more than just a transfer. It was a cultural earthquake. In the summer of 1979, Laurie Cunningham signed for Real Madrid for £950,000, a then record fee for a British player moving abroad. He became the first Englishman and the first black player to ever wear the iconic white shirt at the Santiago Bernabeu. But Madrid didn't know what was coming. From the first touch, the fans were spellbound. On his debut, he scored twice. In El Clásico against Barcelona, he toyed with defenders like it was a game in the schoolyard. He didn't just fit in, he stood out. They called him La Perla Negra, the Black Pearl, not just for his skin, but for his brilliance. He was dazzling, daring, different. In his first season, Laurie helped Madrid win La Liga and the Copa del Rey, becoming a fan favorite in record time. But this wasn't just about trophies. This was about breaking barriers in a league that had never seen a black Englishman, let alone one who danced down the wing with such elegance. The Spanish press admired his talent, but also fixated on his difference. The spotlight was bright, the expectations crushing. And soon, the dreams started to fray. Injuries came. Hamstring tears, ankle problems, his body began to betray him. And without consistency, the Madrid media turned. He went from genius to outsider in a matter of months, from sensation to scapegoat. But even as the critics circled, his teammates never doubted him. They'd seen him in training. They knew what he could do. Laurie Cunningham didn't fail at Madrid. He simply arrived before the world was ready to hold space for him. His time in Spain was short, just 44 appearances and 13 goals for Real Madrid. But his impact, immeasurable. He showed that English players could thrive abroad, that black players could shine on the world's biggest stage. And in the heart of Madrid, he left a memory that never faded. After conquering La Liga and dazzling in El Clásico, the story should have soared. But football, like life, doesn't follow scripts. By 1980, just a year after becoming a Real Madrid icon, Laurie Cunningham suffered a devastating toe injury. It wasn't just a knock, it was a lingering problem that kept him out for most of the 1980-81 season, including the European Cup final against Liverpool. Madrid lost, and Laurie, once the face of flair, began fading from the starting 11. He struggled to regain form. New signings came, the press turned harsh. And just like that, Laurie was no longer a sensation, he was a question mark. In 1983, he was loaned to Manchester United. For a moment, it looked like a fairy tale return. English soil, familiar crowds. He made 5 appearances and even featured in the 1983 FA Cup final. But he wasn't the same player. The injuries had taken something, a fraction of his pace, a bit of that daring instinct. And at this level, fractions matter. What followed was a journey of brief chapters. Sporting Gijón, 1983-84, short-lived, minimal impact. Marseille, 1984-85, glimpses of brilliance but inconsistency plagued him. Leicester City, 1985, just 4 appearances. It was a descent no one expected. Not for the man who once silenced the Camp Nou. Not for the black Englishman who'd worn Madrid's crown. But through it all, Laurie never complained. No tell-all interviews, no public breakdowns. He kept moving, kept playing, kept hoping. In 1986, he returned to Spain to play for Rayo Vallecano, a second division club in Madrid. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. And there, away from the headlines, Laurie Cunningham found joy again. He played with freedom, he entertained fans. He reminded everyone that magic doesn't disappear, it just finds quieter stages. Laurie scored 9 goals in 38 games for Rayo. And the fans, they loved him. Because while the world forgot Laurie Cunningham, he never forgot how to play the game that made him. By the late 1980s, Laurie Cunningham had become a ghost in the headlines. No longer the star of Madrid, no longer the name sung in terraces. But in Vallecas, he was still cherished, still dancing past defenders, still reminding the faithful that legends don't need stadiums, they just need space. And Laurie had found a kind of peace. He was 33 years old, still playing, still smiling. The weight of being the first had never crushed him, but it had cost him. And yet, he carried it all with grace. Then came the morning of July 15th, 1989. A warm summer day in Madrid. Laurie Cunningham got behind the wheel of his car. And just like that, he was gone. A car crash took his life in the early hours, sudden, brutal, final. There were no TV specials, no minute of silence across the country, no grand international tribute for the man who had changed the face of football forever. There was only shock and silence. Just 33 years old, and yet he had already lived multiple lifetimes. First Black England international in a competitive fixture, first Englishman at Real Madrid, the artist who danced through prejudice, the pioneer who opened doors for others and paid the cost of walking through them, and still, no statue, no documentary, no stadium named after him. Only memory. And memories, especially in football, fade fast. But not here. Because Laurie Cunningham didn't just play the game, he changed it. And even in death, he continued to lead. In 2008, he was posthumously inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame. A recognition that came far too late, but meant everything. Because some players win trophies, others win hearts. Laurie Cunningham? He did both, but quietly, elegantly, unapologetically. Laurie Cunningham never asked to be a symbol. He never raised a fist, never made speeches, never called attention to the storm he walked through, because walking through it was enough. But make no mistake, he was a pioneer. Long before the slogans on shirts, before campaigns and hashtags, Laurie was facing it alone. The monkey chants, the threats, the isolation in dressing rooms, the sideways glances from those who didn't know how to handle his talent or his skin. And yet, he responded the only way he knew how. He danced, down the wing, past defenders, into history. He made the ugly beautiful. He met hate with elegance. He didn't fight fire with fire, he fought it with football. And in doing so, he lit the path for the next generation. John Barnes, Ian Wright, Paul Ince, Raheem Sterling. All of them, in some way, walked through the door Laurie had kicked open. He wasn't loud, but his silence spoke volumes. Because sometimes, revolution doesn't roar. Sometimes it glides past defenders with a step over and a grin. Even now, players cite his impact. Not just as a footballer, but as a man who never let the game break him. His name doesn't trend. His shirts aren't bestsellers. His clips are hard to find. But for those who remember, and those who look deeper, Laurie Cunningham is more than a story. He's a standard for bravery, for brilliance, for beauty in a game that so often forgets its poets. Laurie Cunningham didn't just change football, he changed what football could be. Before him, grace was reserved for the usual faces. Flair belonged to the few, and the game wasn't built to celebrate someone like him. But Laurie didn't wait for permission. He danced anyway. And that's what makes his story timeless. Because it wasn't just about goals scored or trophies lifted, though he had both. It was about defying gravity in a world that tried to weigh him down. It was about how, with every touch of the ball, he reminded people that football is art, and that art has no color. His life may have ended far too soon, but his impact stretches far beyond 33 years. You see it in the way wingers move. You hear it in the way fans still whisper his name. You feel it when a player walks into a stadium and knows they belong. Because Laurie once stood there first. No statue, no grandstand, no highlight reel on loop. But ask the right people, and they'll tell you, Laurie Cunningham was one of the greatest we never fully got to see. And maybe that's the final tragedy, but also the final truth. Legends don't always come back for encores. Sometimes they just leave behind a silence that says everything. So if you believe football should honor more than just medals, if you believe in the ones who paved the way, who inspired change, who lit the fire but never stood in its glow, subscribe. Because we don't just tell stories, we remember football souls. Laurie Cunningham, the genius who played like jazz and lived like a revolution,